Alright guys, welcome to part 4 of Trump versus Firebat in the ONOG Summer Circuit Feature Tournament number 3 semifinals. I believe Firebat is up 3 games to 2, and now we're going into what was my favorite game of this entire series, the Patron Warrior versus the Freeze Mage. And this is such an interesting matchup because what's unique about this matchup is that if you can get a very experienced patron player versus a not so experienced freeze mage player, they'll probably win about 80% of the time. Probably, maybe even more. But if you get an experienced freeze mage player versus a not so experienced patron player, they also win about 80% of the time. And that's definitely not true for the majority of other matchups. For instance, if you get someone who's not very experienced with handlock playing someone who's playing patron warrior, for instance, you can just basically play it out pretty simply. Tap, 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 play your big guys, keep going face, don't even worry about complicated decisions. And sometimes the patron warrior has no way to deal with it. Oftentimes, patron warrior has no way to deal with it. They don't get their combo parts on time, they don't get their executes, etc. And eventually, the handlock just ends up winning, even though patron warrior player could have been better. So, like, even at sometimes that matchup can even be something like 50-50, even though one player is clearly better. And, other matches like that too as well. If you play like maybe, you know, Zoo Lock against Druid and you just play all your guys out and don't play around anything, and the Druid just doesn't happen to have those cards, which is somewhat often, then you can just win that matchup as well. But this matchup, I feel like there's so much decision making, there's so much card draw, it's pretty consistent both of the decks that you're likely going to see the better player win. But in this case, we have two fairly experienced players who kind of know what they're doing. There's some peculiar moves going on so far with the Unstable Ghoul and the Acolyte. It's kind of a dance between drawing as many cards to be effective, as many cards as possible to be effective, but also making sure you don't get ahead, quote unquote, in the fatigue battle, so that you don't start fatiguing faster than your opponent. And there's a couple of things you can do in this matchup to win. If you're the freeze mage, well, first of all, the most common way to win in this matchup is to go for the fatigue win, and both players can go for that way of winning, because patron warrior can draw so many cards. They can draw actually more cards than the freeze mage. Especially if they get too greedy with their, or greedy, quote unquote, kind of stupid might be the right word, with their battle rages, then freeze mage can kind of punish them by making draw too many cards and basically fatiguing that way. And maybe they play out their armor smith, it just gets fireballed or frostballed away, they don't get enough armor, and they eventually just die. From the perspective of the patron warrior, you can basically just draw enough armor that you, when it gets to the late game, no matter where the fatigue, as long as you're not like several cards ahead in the fatigue race, then you're basically just going to outlast your opponent. And as long as you have the executes for their Antonidas and their other threats, then you're fine. Recently, we've seen some patron decks without armor smith, and in that situation, you kind of have to go all in and just put a lot of pressure on, get them low, and hope they don't really have. You basically limit their options, and they can't really Alex plus ice block plus do a bunch of board clear at the same time. So it makes it difficult on your opponent, especially if you can do it before turn 10, because then they can't, for instance, ice block and flame strike or something like that. And from the freeze mage perspective, if you do have the opportunity, you can basically burn them out by using the Thorson plus Antonidas cheap spells combination. Sort of like an OTK in that sense. But usually you typically see people go for the fatigue battle, especially if they do have the armor smiths in their deck, which you'll likely see in this game as well. We did see a couple particular plays, which I was about to talk about for a second, but I decided not to go on about the strategy. Firebat decided to play his first Acolyte, but then from there decided to go ahead and play and get rid of the Unstable Ghoul. And then from there, basically not wanting to overdraw, playing out the Doomsayer, making it so that he can have the next play. And here's where it gets really interesting, because Obviously, Trump couldn't play the Ember Thorson that last turn, but he does have all the parts in hand to be able to push Firebat in this situation, or pop the Ice Block from Firebat's side. Firebat now does play the Acolyte, but the Acolyte's pretty safe in this situation. Trump would have to use very valuable resources in order to make Firebat overdraw, so Firebat figures this is his best chance to get this Acolyte out. Firebat actually has drawn many, many more cards than Trump so far. It doesn't seem like it, but Trump hasn't used Battle Rage, for instance. So by the time this Acolyte goes up, I mean, Trump has basically been drawing a bunch of basically combo pieces and not a whole lot of card draw. So it doesn't seem like it, but Firebat has actually gotten very far ahead, or behind, however you want to think about it. And these next turns end up being very, very interesting. I believe Trump goes for the Thorson play this turn, if I'm remembering correctly. And on Firebat's side, he has a lot of pieces for the Thorson, but not the Thorson yet. And I think he draws it this next turn, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he draws it in one of these next couple turns. So, let's see. Yeah, so Trump goes for the Thorson, and okay, now I remember now. Yeah, so Firebat decides to fireball this down. Firebat decides to Firebat it. Fireball it down, and he, what does he do? I think he just pings face. Sorry, the point is 2 turns from now is a really, really important turn, is what I'm trying to get to, I suppose. 2 turns from now is a very, very important turn. Also, Firebat doesn't really worry about getting him to Battle Rage range because he's fine with getting ahead in the Fatigue Wars. So basically, Trump takes his entire turn to think about what he's going to do next turn. Since his hand is he picked up the second Whirlwind, so basically his combo next turn is going to be 9 mana. Well, it could be 7 mana if he goes for War Song, Frothing, Armor Smith, Double Whirlwind, which I will cover in a second. I'm going to talk about all the possibilities this coming turn. But typically what he would normally do is go War Song, Frothing, Grim Patron, 0 mana Whirlwind, and then whether he plays the Armor Smith or the second Whirlwind for the 1 mana, it's up to him. So yeah, he's basically taking this entire time to do all the math to figure out what's the best choice to go. He knows that this is an Ice Bear on Firebat's side, so he knows that Firebat is currently at 31 health essentially, because I mean you're not gonna spell him down, spell damage him down from that high with Patron Warrior. Actually, there's not even a way to do spell damage. There's no Moral Strike or anything. So Firebat picks up the Ember Thorson, and he has a lot of combo parts in hand. Once he draws the Antonidas, he's able to Frostbolt, Ice Lance. He could even fit in... no. Yes. Yeah, well, he could fit in 1 Frost Nova, and then a single Frostbolt and an Ice Lance on the same turn if he ever picks up Antonidas. So, a pretty good turn to Thorson, especially because there was nothing else to do there. His Frost Nova and his Ice Bear, or his Ice Bear could be played. Other things are too useful. Anyway, so I'm going to pause it right now. We're going to pause it right now. So what Trump ends up going for here is Warsong Commander, Frothing Berserker, Patron, Enrage the Patron, Warsong Commander, Frothing Berserker, Grim Patron, Armor Smith, and then Enrage one of the patrons, and then Whirlwind, and then he basically gets his opponent down to 10, and he picks up 10 armor, I believe. And then he kills off the Thorson. But there's a couple other things there's obviously a lot of variations you could do, and I just want to talk about them for a second right now. Actually, let me just get this clear for a second. Oops. This thing's annoying. Sorry, I'm gonna scroll back so that there's like nothing on the board, so I can kind of like wiggle and wave my pointer around. So he picks up the Trump picks up the Inner Rage. I kind of discarded that card. He could actually have used that. But I just looked at the possibilities with just Whirlwind. And so what he did was, like I said, he killed this. He got his opponent down to 10, and he got 10 health, which is kind of like a in-between play. It gets a decent amount of armor, but at the same time, it's not like a ridiculous amount of armor. Couple things he could have done if he had played no armor smith. Um, and this is also I'm just kind of like babbling here, but a lot of people think that patron warrior is kind of like, oh, you play your patrons, play your frothings, and it's like, oh, you kill face. But there's a lot of intricate decision making, especially when you want to. You definitely have to kill this Thorson right here. Otherwise, Firebat 10 would get way, way, way too cheap, and he'd be able to just kind of run away with the game with so many things he can do with Antonidas. So he has to kill this, but he also wants to pop the block, or get a bunch of armor for himself, or both potentially. Um, so one thing, so if you just look at the possibilities, say he didn't play the armor smith and he just went war song, frothing, grim patron, one grim patron, and then inner rage. The thing is, a lot of people don't really know what to do from that situation. So once you whirlwind, obviously there's going to be 4 patrons plus the frothing, right? And at that point, the frothing would be at 8 attack. Then you have a 5-1, a 3-2, a 3-3, and a 3-3. But what you do from there is a real tricky part, because what you could do is, some people maybe think you throw away the 5-1 into this guy first, just to get rid of the guy that's least useful and propagate the rest of your board. However, you don't actually get all the value from your patrons anyway. Only 2 of them get to propagate, so it doesn't really make much sense. And in the end, since your frothing isn't that big at all, you actually don't get the lethal off, since you don't get the 5 damage off as well. So you don't actually get to pop the block. If I'm looking at my math right here, you have 15 plus 15. Yes, you'd have a 15 frothing instead of 15 from your patrons, because there'd be 5 on the board. So you don't actually pop the block. You don't actually get any armor, which is, I mean, it's decent to get him down to 1 health, but it's just so much more pressure on your opponent if you pop the block. So option number 2, once you get all those guys on the board, you throw the 5 into the face, and then from there, what you do is you whirlwind, right? Because you have a 3-2, a 3-3, and a 3-3. So you whirlwind. The only problem with that is, because you have the 5-1 on the board, you don't actually get the patron from that. So you only spawn 1 patron out of your 3 possible on the board, which is really, really kind of sad. From there, you throw the 3-2. So you have a remaining 3-1, 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, 3-3 after that. Throw the 3-1 this guy. Your Frothing Berserker is then at 19. And I've already written all this down, by the way. I can't do math that fast. And then from 19, since you already threw 5 into the face, 5 plus 19 is 24. And then 27, 30, and you pop his block. He's exactly at 1. That's a really, really nice situation. A very similar situation is, instead of doing that, you do something similar. You throw the... sorry, let me look at my... I'm trying to look see what my notes actually mean. Just a bunch of numbers written down. So you have the frothing, and then okay, that makes sense. Okay, so what you do is you throw the 5-1 at the face, and then instead of whirlwinding first, you throw the 3-2 into the Emperor Thorson. And you still get the whirlwind off on the Thorson to be able to make your frothing bigger next turn. Your frothing doesn't end up being as big, but instead of just getting 1 extra patron off your 3 that were available, you throw your 3-2 away, but now both of your 3-3s are able to get extra patrons because you have that space on the board. Because you only have 5 minions on the board. So your 5-1 dies, and then you're left with, and obviously the patron dies after the second whirlwind, and you're left with a war song, a 2-1 war song, a 16 damage frothing, and then 4 3 damage patrons, all of which can be propagated again. 3-2, 3-2, 3-3, 3-3. And so 5 plus 16 is 21, and then the next patron is 24, 27, 30. Pop the block exactly at 1. And the difference is that you actually, maybe you have too many patrons because of the fact that your opponent can, with so much AoE, like maybe he pings one of the 3-3s and blizzards, and all of a sudden you're left with only 1 3-1. Whereas in the other situation, you'd be left with a 3-2, 3-2, 3-3. And if he blizzards, then you actually still have a 3-3 left over. So it's kind of up to you whether you want to have a board with 6 minions on board or one with only 5 minions on board. ends up being pretty similar. In all those cases, you don't actually get any armor. The last possible situation, or the thing that you could do, is you can go War Song, Frothing, Frothing, Armor Smith, and then you enrage the Armor Smith, and uh, what you do. Actually, I didn't do the apologies. I actually paused it right here when I was doing the math, and I forgot about the extra interrange that came in. But after thinking about this, after realizing this, I think that this is the actual best option. So what you would do is you go War Song, Frothing, Frothing, Armor Smith. You interrange the Armor Smith. It brings both the Frothings to 3. Then you Whirlwind brings both Frothings to 8, and you Whirlwind again, and then brings them to 13. And then what you do, you throw the enraged Armorsmith into this guy, and then it kills the Emperor, obviously, but then you're left with 15-15 on your Frothings. Um, so that brings him to exactly 1, but you don't actually pop the block. Now, I'm sorry for doing this while in the middle of this, but I don't really want to do a retake of this since I've already talked about this so long. Let me just think for a second. Is there a way? Maybe you don't armor rage. Maybe you don't interrage the armor smith. Maybe you interrage one of the frothings to get them low. The problem is that the frothings are such high attack value that you can't really like kind of beat them down with like patrons to get them super low. You really you would actually probably prefer to get him to 1 and not pop the block than get him to uh, like 15 or 16 or so and then pop the block. Um, Sorry, I should have realized that the interrange was coming in. I don't think there's an actual way, because yeah, what you would have to do is you'd have to get one so ridiculously big that it did like 30 damage, which is not really possible in the situation. And then attack the other one in to get the extra damage in, and I don't think that's possible. So actually, that's probably the best way you can do it. You don't use a second inner range because it makes it too big, and getting your opponent to 15 just doesn't do anything. Um, yes, you could use Grim Patron in future turns, but you would need a second War Song, and you need more pieces than that. In any case, all these situations basically require you to get to rid yourself of a lot of resources in hand. By the way, that last example, you get 10 armor out of it as well, so that's kind of enticing. But if, say for instance, Firebat just like flame strikes, then you're in a really bad spot because you can't use Battle Rage. And a lot of times you don't want to use Battle Rage for sometimes any cards at all in this matchup. But Trump is actually way ahead, quote unquote, or sorry, behind. Well, the point is, Firebat's drawn way more cards than Trump. So Trump actually needs resources in order to stay in this game, or else he's going to get burned out by Alex Straza and Archmage Intonitis. And so he actually needs resources. So you actually see him Battle Rage. I'm actually going to play it right now. I've already told you what he does. So you actually he needs resources, so that the Battle Rage that he plays in the following turn is actually very, very important to him. Actually, no matter what he does, if he gets Flame Strike, it's kind of a disaster. Because he'd be unable to basically draw any cards from there, and he's basically stuck just drawing one card at a time, and he wouldn't have the resources to deal with Firebat had to do. So yeah, as far as like which resources to give up, yeah, there's considerations. I'm not using your second whirlwind, for instance, but I think you kind of just have to go all in this situation. Um, Trump does go. Trump does kind of go all in, even though, like I said, it was like a half and half play. But the reason why I feel like he did go all in is because he made sure to get as much armor as possible, and he's going all in on that route of victory, kind of putting pressure on his opponent and getting rid of all his resources to go for this half and half play. So that's what I'm referring to, is the fact that he's going all in on this. He's using all of his resources to go for this half and half play and putting a lot of pressure on his opponent, and also getting a decent amount of armor. Did I make a mistake? I guess he only went to 8 armor. So the play I said before with the frothing would have gotten to 10 armor, but not in this case because he doesn't use a second whirlwind. So here's where it gets a little bit interesting, because Firebat has no way to deal with this. He's gonna hope that his Frost Nova and Doomsayer can do the job. He does something really, really smart, which is ping one of the patrons first. before he plays his Frost Nova, and that fills the board, which prevents Trump from being able to use a charging minion plus execute to get rid of the Doomsayer. So yeah, you see him stop. He pings the minion first, then goes for the Frost Nova, then goes for the Doomsayer, and then he plays. He goes for the loot order because he wants the card draw. At that point, he's kind of roping. I kind of agree with this anyway. And he goes for the Ice Barrier too. Gets a lot of stuff on the board. Very, very nice play by him. Trump elects to, in this case, I'm just going to speed it up because these aren't the most difficult decisions. I guess this one is kind of difficult. He goes for the Battle Rage, which is, it seems kind of crazy because you're drawing 5 cards here, but like I said, he had drawn way fewer cards than Firebat up to that point. And so he's basically more or less allowed to do this because he needs resources. Definitely not going to use that second Battle Rage though. But yeah, he's able to basically just Whirlwind and execute and get a ton of armor in the process, which is really huge for his cause. Whirlwind execute. It's kind of funny because these animations take absolutely forever. So he starts roping and it looks like he didn't get everything off, but he actually just queued it all up. I'll let you guys watch just to see how ridiculous this is. You gotta have, I mean, you obviously have to have all of those lightning bolts go off for the armor smith and the frothing. So he queues his hull up. It doesn't look like he actually did it, but he does. I hate this so much. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to spout my opinions off in this analysis video, but I just hate it so much. Because are beginners really counting every single time those lightning bolts flash? Do they really need to have it go off for every single minion? I don't think so. Anyway, so Trump gets all of his actions off. And Firebat's left a Blizzard here. You might think, why doesn't he just Frostbolt the Armorsmith first? But it doesn't really make any difference because he knows that he's going to use the Frostbolt with Antonidas anyway. So Frostbolting here, you basically lose 4 damage in the Frostbolt, and you're preventing him from getting 6 armor because you'd be Frostbolting this anyway. So yeah, you'd be preventing your opponent from getting 6 armor. But you're going to get 6 damage from the Fireball that you get from the Antonidas anyway, so no real reason to Frostbolt there. It's unfortunate that Trump gets... unfortunate for Firebat's sake that Trump gets a lot of armor. And from here, Trump has a little bit of an advantage. Having this Harrison Jones is actually kind of huge. Trump decides to just take care of this anti-killbot right away. He doesn't really need... Well, he kind of needs the Death Bite, but it's more important to reduce the amount of minion damage that's coming in from the Healbot. So he smartly, in my opinion, decides to get rid of the Healbot with his Death Bite instead of saving it for more Armorsmith stuff. He doesn't have like multiple... I mean, he's already got rid of his first Unseeable Ghoul. He's gotten rid of 2 Whirlwinds, so it's unlikely he's going to get a huge Armorsmith thing off. And even if he does, he'd have to play something like Gnomish Inventor and Acolyte of Pain in order to do that, and then he'd be fatiguing even harder. So it's very unlikely that this Death Bite does more, heals for more than the Healbot would just be doing damage to his face at the moment. So in the end, does the right thing, kills it off, puts the Harrison Jones down, which puts pressure on Firebat to go ahead and kill it. And Firebat doesn't want to be using Frostbolt right here because he needs to use that with the Archmage Antonidas. So here's where here's where the decisions get really, really complicated, because how much does Trump want to get the Gnomish Inventor on the board to start doing damage, and how much does he want to prevent himself from drawing cards? The other thing is that if Firebat picks up any AoE, then this is a perfect chance to actually use the AoE. Flame Trick would actually be good if Trump had played the Gnomish Inventor there. Obviously, he wants to armor up as well, so that's another consideration. Firebat's sensing he needs cards, he needs to draw the Antonidas as fast as possible, goes ahead and plays the Arcane Intellect even though he's starting to get closer to fatigue. Plays the Scientist to eventually contest this Harrison, and he doesn't want to use his Frost Nova, or excuse me, his Frostbolt to deal with it, because he needs that for the extra damage from the Antonidas. 5 cards left in Trump's deck, 4 left in Firebat, but it's not so far ahead to the point where it can overcome the amount of armor that Trump has built up at this point, which is going to be at 61, which is kind of insane. So Firebat picks up Antonius here, and in my opinion, he kind of makes his play too quickly. He just starts flinging things without thinking about it. Firebat does this a lot. What he likes to do when he plays Antonius is he likes to limit his opponent's options as much as possible, which is a really good way to play Hearthstone. The problem is that it's pretty likely that Trump has a way to execute it, whether it be by Warsong running guy in and execute it, or Inner Rage execute it, or you know, use a weapon execute it, anything like that. Actually, was that the last? No, he has another Death Bite left if I remember correctly. Yeah, he does. So there's so many ways for him to get rid of it that I just feel like well, he did freeze the face. There is that. So, but in any case, even though Firebat's seen or two Whirlwinds and an Inner Rage and all that stuff, I just feel like with the amount of cards that Trump has in hand, it's somewhat easy for him to execute it. It might be a situation where Firebat feels he's behind and needs to make the I hope he doesn't have it play, which is reasonable. But at the same time, I feel like he could have gotten more potential damage in had he gone face there with all the damage. I mean, obviously he would have gotten more damage in, but it might have worked out better for him in the end, because if Trump has a way to deal with this regardless, then Firebat kind of wasted a bit of damage. Actually, a significant amount of damage. Because he ended up missing 2 Ice Lances on face, and 8 damage can mean a huge difference in this situation. So Trump thinks about it for a while. He finally just gets rid of it, and yeah. So now Firebat's in a kind of uncomfortable position where he only has these fireballs left, and then Alexstrasza starts fireballing him. This is actually kind of correct. The reason why is because once you play your Alexstrasza, it gives Trump the green light to go ahead and go into some Warsong combos, right? He starts Warsong comboing, does all that stuff, throws the Frothing Berserker in, and then, like, for instance, if he had, like, he goes Warsong, Grim Patron, Unstable Ghoul, starts throwing, like, a couple of Grim Patrons in, maybe uses Deathbite or something, and just starts using his combos. And Firebat doesn't have the AoE to deal with that kind of stuff right now. I'm not sure if that was what he was thinking about. Now that I think about it, he hasn't seen any, or he knows that both Whirlwinds and both Inner Rages are gone, so it makes it a bit difficult to fill out the board like that. So maybe that wasn't what he was thinking about, or maybe he overlooked it a bit. We see Trump's out of cards and he's at 30 health, so still a pretty precarious position. Firebat feels like he's probably in a good position at this point. But it turns out that playing Alexstrasza a bit earlier would have been the better decision. Because, well, first of all, Firebat can top deck the AoE out of his deck, which is pretty likely. And if you feel like you're behind, then you should probably go for that. And also, he knows that there's no executes left. So it might, if he was playing from the position of I need to get greedy and hope my Antonius doesn't die, I feel like in this situation it would have been much more, even more difficult to deal with the Alexstrasza, especially without a Deathbite equipped. And the initial commentators, Hotform and Monk, definitely get on him about this. It's definitely just a tough decision. One thing, I guess the one I would have to be the most critical about Firebat in this situation is the speed with which he played. Seems like Trump put a lot more thought into his plays. They weren't necessarily always correct. Like, for instance, in this case, he could have just killed the Mad Scientist off. I guess he wanted to get as much value out of this Armor Smith as possible. He's kind of sort of waiting for the Alexstrasza to come so that he can make use of this Deathbite, so that he can go ahead and kill it. But in this case, I think Firebat smartly holds on to the Alexstrasza, knowing that with the Deathbite in place, it makes it much easier to be able to kill the Alexstrasza. So in this case, I think it's very, very smart. So yeah, Trump's just holding on to that. And I think this is where he makes a really strange play by playing the Armor Smith and the Unstable Ghoul. But anyway, getting back to what I was talking about earlier. No, he slams this. That's right. He slams it. Which makes a lot more sense. But he slams it and plays the Armor Smith on Unstable Ghoul, which makes a bit of sense because he wants to set up for future turns. But by this point, he almost certainly knows that Firebat has AoE left in his deck, since he hadn't seen a single Flame Strike. And he knows that Flame Strike is something that all freeze mages hold at least one of. So yeah, the going back to the point I was making earlier, even though Trump is, in my estimation, making some small, well, not misplays, but he's using some strange lines of play. He's still thinking about each and every turn very carefully, whereas I think Firebat's maybe playing a little bit too fast. He's capable of playing fast and making the right decision, but there are some certain things that he could have maybe done a little better and maybe played the Alex Straws out a little bit faster. So this gets the Flame Strike. Actually, Firebat plays 2 Flame Strikes in his deck. So he's not... Actually, does Trump know that he plays 2 Flame Strikes? Did we see 2 Flame Strikes in the Druid game? I don't remember. I don't think so. Yeah, I think he still had the second one in hand. So here Trump gets his Armorsmith taken out really quickly, which is just not a very good situation for him. I think he only got 3 armor off it. Or 2 armor. But from this point, Firebat just doesn't have enough damage to kind of deal with the situation. And yeah, Firebat finally goes for the Alex Straws, I believe, this turn, thinking that he has really no other choice. And is that what he does? Trump makes a really good play to finish this off. Yeah, okay. I think this is the turn, if I remember correctly. So Trump makes a really good play, basically sequencing it perfectly. He needs to get Firebat at exactly 1 to win the game, and I think he does it this turn. He goes Morrison Commander, Grim Patron, hits the face, get him to 9. And then his Frothing Berserker ends up being at, so 1, 2, 3, 4, ends up being at 6, right? But he needs to do 8 damage. So what he does is throws the Grim Patron into the Alex in order to get the extra 2 damage to go to face, which is not something that everyone would see. If you don't do it exactly that way, by the way, you lose the game because Firebat just fireballs you in the face and you die. So he actually has to win this turn, especially because he has no way to kill the Alexstrasza. And if he kills the Alexstrasza, then Firebat could win with the extra fireball in hand. He could Flame Strike and then fireball, and then he could win eventually. So Trump has to do this exactly perfectly, and he does. Thinks about it for a couple seconds. Hits. Any other sequencing would have been incorrect. If he had run the Frothing and then Patron in, he would have lost. If he had run the Patron Frothing, would have lost. He had exactly run the Patron in and then the Frothing. So we go to game 7, and yeah. So I mean, I sound a bit too critical, but that was a really well played game by both players. It was extremely well played. Obviously, I was a little bit critical of Firebat playing a little bit too fast, but he has so much experience in this matchup and so much experience in Hearthstone in general that he was making the plays he was making weren't technically bad. They were just really fast, and I mean, same goes for Trump. He was a little bit kind of awkward plays here and there, but overall, I think that they both played extremely well. And in the matchups between Grim Patron and Freeze Mage, you're expected to see some mistakes, and the plays they made weren't really actually mistakes. They were just how do I put this? They were just different lines of play essentially, and I somewhat disagreed with them. You know, Monk and Hotform somewhat disagreed with them, but it's really hard to play better than that in that situation. Even the best players in the world, especially because you don't have perfect information like the commentators do. So, despite all my criticism, it's definitely one of the better played games you will ever see. And so, definitely congratulations to Trump, and well played to both of them. So, yeah, game 7 is going to be underway, and this is a pretty well played game as well. I don't want to make this go to part 5, so I'm just gonna sit back and stretch for a couple seconds while the mulligans go off, and take a drink of water for a bit. All right, so this matchup is between obviously Freeze Mage and the Hybrid Hunter from Trump, and Hybrid Hunter is really really hard for Freeze Mage to deal with. Well, Mid Range Hunter and Hybrid Hunter, but um, I think Hybrid Hunter actually might be more difficult for Freeze Mage to deal with than Mid Range Hunter, and the reason is because you get off to such a fast start that Freeze Mage has to deal with. And if you're playing against Face Hunter as Freeze Mage, you basically just deal with your early minions and then you heal up and then you're fine because they run out of the cards. Against Midrange Hunter, you can't really deal with their mid-range minions, mid-range or to late game minions like the High Main and potentially Doctor Boom, stuff like that. It's really difficult to deal with those guys. But you do have a few turns to kind of set up and get your guys out into the field. Whereas with a hybrid deck, you basically have to deal with your minions early on. Fortunately for Firebat, Trump doesn't have a super fast start, but he does have the double high main, which is obviously really difficult to deal with. For you new Freeze Mage players out there, this is important that he trades first. Otherwise, he draws potentially into secrets. If he draws first, maybe he draws a couple secrets, and he's like, say for instance, he drew two secrets there, and he gets a secret out the Mad Scientist. Now he no longer has any value out of the Mad Scientist, and not only that, he can't actually. He has secrets stuck in his hand, which you don't want to have happen. You want to get him off of your Mad Scientist and draw your best cards. So here the pressure comes down from Trump. He plays the Paladin Treader. And Firebat, instead of Frostbolting that, he knows he needs to like save some of this burn for bigger minions, more important minions. Maybe be able to erase them in the end. Goes for the draw instead. And he knows he has a bit of time, especially because he will be able to play the second Ice Barrier this coming turn. Also, this allows him to basically ping his his Acolyte, and if Trump wants to prevent that possibility, then he'd have to attack into him himself. So this turn, I believe he actually just goes with Emperor, if I remember correctly, just to make everything so much cheaper, because you're not going to go on a huge combo turn with Freeze Mage in this matchup. You basically just want everything cheaper. You can get your utility cards out better. So he freezes his gets the freezing trap procced, so that he can make his Blood Mage Thanos cheaper later, which can be useful in the future, so that he can utilize the spell damage. Like for instance on turn 9, maybe he can go Blood Mage Thanos Flame Strike, maybe he can use Blood Mage Thanos with Frostbolt to take more damage off of a creature. So in this situation, I think, Trump sees a possibility to make Firebat overdraw. All he has to do is hit the Acolyte once and then throw a guy into it, and then Firebat overdraws by 1, which is kind of a big deal, especially because Firebat's going to be drawing 2 cards anyway, drawing 1 card with the Acolyte and then drawing naturally this coming turn anyway, so he'd be at 10 anyway. I keep saying anyway. The point is that Firebat's his hand's gonna be full regardless. So it makes sense to make him overdraw. Sometimes if you make your opponent draw 3 cards and they only overdraw 1, it's actually detrimental to you, because they eventually, you allow them to draw those cards in the first place, and then making them burn 1 isn't as important as them getting the draws in the first place. So yeah, Trump really wants an overdraw, so he plays a bunch of cards, and none of them hit. So he eventually hits here. And you might be wondering why he actually hit the Acolyte in the end when he was going to draw those anyway. And not get the face damage in, and the reason is because, first of all, the Acolyte can help clear this board, but with a hand of cheapened cards from the previous turn, what you can do is basically just play a bunch of cards out and then get the cards anyway, which is a bad situation. So Trump goes for the safe play regardless. And Firebat has a good Flame Strike, so he Flame Strikes, and that's 6 damage, so pretty useful, even though it's kind of a waste of Like you feel bad using a frostbolt when you could just ping it, but it is taking 6 damage off the table, which is very very important. 1 mana heal for 6 is pretty good, kind of like Flash of Light. In any case, Trump uses his abusive sergeant to get some damage in, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Um, so Firebat goes for a really interesting play in which he Bloodmates Thalnos and Frostbolts, if I remember correctly, and then he pings. Um, a lot of times you want to get your barrier out as fast as possible in order to allow your opponent to proc it. Another thing he could have done this turn is use Blizzard, but I think he wants to save Blizzard for a better opportunity. And what he can do is, sorry, something popped up. Anyway, what he can do is after this turn he can ping the high main and then Blizzard the entire board, which is obviously really really good. The problem is that Trump goes for Lotheb in this situation. Well, first he gets the nice roll on the extra damage on that Flame Tongue Totem, but he goes for the Lotheb, and this puts Firebat in a really really tricky position. Right now, Trump is thinking about a couple things. He's thinking about whether to attack with a Flame Tongue, or whether to Ironbeak Owl his high main to get 8 damage right now, which is really important. But Lotheb is really, really good in this situation, especially because you've seen a few minions come out. Not super likely that Firebat has more minions. So here's where this gets really interesting. My initial thought was he should probably just Ice Barrier and then ping the high main. So that he just gets the healing off right now, but instead he goes for the Fireball on the Lotheb, and the reasoning for that is because he wants to just permanently get this damage off the table, whereas the Ice Barrier heals now, but if he can just get the 7 damage, like he's never going to take that 7 damage ever again from here on out, right? Which is very very important. Trump gets a really good draw with the Stranglethorn Tiger to threaten more damage, and Firebat responds. What does he respond with? He goes with the Antonidas Ice Barrier instead of Ice Block, and he then goes with the Ice Lance on, I believe, the high main. And I think he Ice Lances face as well, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so this seems like a really greedy play, right? But I went over this several times. And what he could have done, like if he went with the Ice Barrier the previous turn and went with a ping high main, he takes a lot of damage. And then even if he does the same play the next turn, Trump can still Ironbeak Owl this guy and hit face and get him really low, and or kill him if he does that. If he doesn't use Ice Block the next turn, so whether he Fireballed or Ice Barrier the previous turn, he takes so much damage that it doesn't actually matter. If he Ice Blocks this turn, what happens is that Trump gets the damage in anyway, and he gets him down to 1. And he gets him down to 1, and he's able to Ironbeak Owl the Antonidas with a Freezing Trap on board. So basically this Antonidas can never actually do anything ever again. And so no matter what happens, I went over this like several times. This seems like a really, really greedy play by Firebat, but it's actually the correct play because there's no other way he was actually going to win this game. He just had to hope that Trump didn't have the exact cards he had, which was Ironbeak Owl to secure the kill this coming turn. Sorry for a spoiler this coming turn. But this actually ends up being the correct play because he needs to play as greedy as possible. And if he plays Ice Block, he's never going to get value out of the Ice Barrier ever again. It's just basically an unplayable card because all Trump has to do is hero power. So no matter what situation Firebat puts himself in, like if Firebat plays the Ice Blocks, for instance, he needs to draw Alex draws in the next 2 cards, and in that time he has to be able to clear the board. It makes what it ends up coming down to is even if he uses the heal bot and something like Blizzard in future turns, he still can't prevent himself from dying to the board because this guy ends up just never dying. And he can get owled. Anyway, it seems crazy, but if you go through all the possibilities, and Firebat ends up dying, and Trump is able to find his lethal, and using the Flame Tongue Totem, which ends up being a huge pain in the ass. And yeah, so honestly, I think that Firebat played as well as he could have. You see Trump celebrating. But I went over all the possibilities, and what it comes down to is Firebat could have maybe gone a different line, played something like Ice Block, but in the end he was looking to top deck Alexstrasza in about 3 turns. He would use the heal bot, get back to 10, but he'd still be in trouble of Trump top decking something to win the game. Even if Trump doesn't top deck something to win the game, he basically can hero power him down every single turn. He has the Glaze in hand. Obviously, Firebat doesn't know his hand either, so it's hard for him to know exactly what to do. But if he played the Ice Block, he basically would have been in a situation where he kind of pseudo clears the board. I think he would have like a Frozen Tiger left, and then yeah, he would have at 9 essentially, because Trump could have gone down to 1, and then he'd be looking to basically Alexstrasza and. Sorry, excuse me. I screwed up. Okay, what I meant to say is that the only way that Firebat survives over the next 3 turns is if he doesn't play Antonidas at all, and then he uses Ping Blizzard and then Ice Block. The only way he lives. And then from there on, he doesn't have these fireballs, so he can't erase, so therefore he has to top deck Alexstrasza. That's what I meant to say. Sorry for the rambling. I went over this like a couple days ago. And so what he had to, the reason why he has to draw the Alexstrasza is because he wouldn't have these fireballs to help race in hand. So he'd have to Ping Blizzard, never play the Antonidas, and he'd have to heal bot up, and then he'd be taking a lot of damage in the meantime. So he'd be kind of screwed. So in the end, Firebat made the best play, which is the greedy play. Essentially his mistake was, I think, ringing Freeze Mage. The thing about Freeze Mage is that it's hard not to get a win a lot of the times, because you're going to be beating stuff like, aggro Paladin, normal Paladin, although people don't really play that much. If they're inexperienced with Patron Warrior, you can win that. You can win the Zoom matchup. You can win the Phase Hunter matchup. There's a lot of matchups out there that allow you to win. But I think that Firebat, he kind of relied on the Freeze Mage too much. It's been a really, really good deck to him for all of 2015. And I think in the end, I mean, obviously it cost him this match. It's easy for me to sit here and say that it was a mistake, but yeah, it ended up costing him this match. Obviously very well played by both players, and Trump ends up taking it 4-3. So yeah, that'll do it for episode 2 of this entire thing. This ended up taking a long time. Obviously, it's a best of 7, which is longer than most series, and obviously there's a very, very long match with that Patron versus Freeze Mage. So thank you for watching. That will conclude this, and catch me next time when I do this. It's going to be on my stream at twitch.tv/c2hs. I will obviously upload the VODs to YouTube as well. So thanks guys, and bye bye.